We are live. Welcome to Conscious Conversations. This is the place where we are going to talk about all things related to meditation, breath work, conscious parenting, fatherhood, and just conscious evolution in general. And today I'm fortunate enough to be with another conscious father on this planet, Mr. Jakob Brown. I will call this gentleman a friend and just a good human being all around. He is in the coaching space as well. He is a divine embodiment coach, and I'm going to let him speak to a little bit more about that, as well as give you some details on his life. But we've followed very similar paths as it's related to our ultimate destination of becoming a father, and we'll probably speak to that a little bit as well today. But Jakob, welcome, my friend. I'm so glad you're here.
Thank you, my friend. Yeah, I'm happy to be here. It's exciting to have these conversations. I think it helps everyone. So really excited to share my story and get to know you a little bit better too. I mean, just your own personal experiences. So
thank you, brother. So let's start with the basic question of your path to fatherhood. Was it something that you had known? I preface this by saying, in my experience with fathers, they kind of fall into different camps. Some have known all along they want to be fathers. Some, it's kind of like they want to be a father, but they're nervous about it. And others, it kind of happens unexpectedly in an unplanned fashion. And there's probably other variations of that, but those are three primary ones. So where did you fall in those categories, or could you put yourself into those?
Yeah, of course. So, I mean, I always thought I was going to be a father down the line, maybe when I was like 40 or so. But I ended up falling into fatherhood accidentally. My story's kind of interesting. It was like on the flight home from Peru after like a plant medicine journey, like the day I got back, the very day I got back, I got the girl I was seeing pregnant, and I'd only known her for a month. So a lot of challenges came up down the line. And that's kind of where I started.
Yeah, I totally get it. And again, similar to my path, it's like, again, I had planned most of my life on not having children. And I was very adamant in that decision. I was like, no, it's like nails on chalkboard. I have no interest in it. But as life kind of played itself out in my 47th year, I found, or life kind of led me toward this amazing woman. We hit it off, and we both kind of talked about the idea of the child somewhere, I guess. And 4 months into our relationship, same kind of thing. We found out she was pregnant, and it was an interesting reveal for me in terms of a moment in time that I wasn't expecting, and it kind of threw me into a lot of turbulence in my life. And we can talk about that at another date, but I understand where it is when you're like, ooh, this comes up suddenly, and it's kind of a challenging scenario. Ultimately, for you, do you have 2 children now?
I do, yeah. So, I mean, things worked out. I married that woman. Now we have two beautiful girls, and one's 4, one's 1. So it's hectic times, but yeah, that's where I'm at now.
That's amazing. What do you think, in your estimation, what have been some of the biggest challenges that fatherhood has presented to you, in terms of just navigating the ins and outs of daily life? Because I know you also work, right? Again, you're a coach and you do other things as well. So you have the demands of life. And then what do you think of the challenges of fatherhood that you may or may not have been expecting?
Yeah, I mean, the biggest one, which I think you might be expecting, is time. Like most of the day is, centered around raising children, basically. Like they're always there and they need you. So I think until they hit a certain age, it's time. But that one's pretty obvious, I would say. But that's been the biggest one. The other one is just like communication. How do you communicate with people that don't understand language yet? So it's been good and bad, I think, like where it's like fun to learn to communicate in new ways or old ways, really. And also really challenging at times to handle that. Like how can I calm, my 4-year-old down when she's having a fit? It's like, well, some of these tools I'm picking up through learning breath work and coaching and just my own work of self-care have really helped that. It's like, well, if you just breathe, like, can I help her breathe? Can I help her feel, like with a hug instead of words? Because she doesn't necessarily understand words. So yeah, those are a couple of things. Other challenges, I mean, there's a lot. I think it's just money, money, they cost money. Lots of things.
Yeah,
Lots
lots.
of,
You bring up.
what about you?
Go ahead, so please.
I was just wondering, what about you? Like, what have you seen as challenges that were unexpected?
Um, I think, as you mentioned, the communication thing was a major challenge for me. And because I think people approach it in a couple of different ways, because it's easy to fall in the trap of like doing baby talk to a young child. And so I hadn't thought about how I was going to parent prior to this happening. And some
Yeah.
people do. So it's kind of like, what do I do now? Um, as it turns out, we both attempted early on to almost speak to them like they're adults.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is, speaking in full sentences as much as possible, um, and not using the ooh, it's every once in a while you can't help but do that because they're so darn cute.
Hmm.
Um, Speaking in full sentences, treating them as if they were a human, right? I mean, I say they are human, but a developed human. And over time, allowing them to kind of just catch on to the vocabulary and let things happen, but wanting to respect the fact that I'm a believer that um, when these kids come on the planet, they're as close to spirit as we will probably ever be on this
Mm.
planet. And they just don't yet have the language. And so when I look at my child, I'm challenging myself to look beyond the early stages, that this is a baby, right? Obviously, we have to protect them and do everything we can to love up on them and give them and meet their needs, but just also realizing that this is like this person's been around the block, on many levels, and are probably often more attuned to something way bigger than us than we are. And so I wanted to have almost a reverence for that in that space.
Mm.
Um, but I winged that. It's because it was like I said, I didn't plan on anything. So that was one of the biggest challenges. It's like saying, "Holy crud! I didn't think about anything about how I was going to raise a child." And
Yeah.
like that, when you wrap your head around, like, wait a second, that's crazy. And I don't know what you think about that, but I'm like, this is probably the most important job in the world. I mean, raising a child, the future of our planet. And almost every other job you have, right? You have to have some level of expertise or plan certification, something, right? And we
Right.
quit with nothing. I mean, I don't know. Any thoughts on that? I'm just like, holy smokes.
I love how you brought it there. I mean, like, that's something, like, because when I went into it, I had no idea. Like, and I didn't really do any of the planning. I was just like, let's wing it and let's see what happens. And I think that is a huge challenge for men that go into these unexpected pregnancies, and women too, obviously. Probably more so women in some ways.
Yeah.
But and that's something to look for, is like, some people plan it out and it seems easy for them sometimes, in my view. Like, I don't know that it's easy. It probably isn't, but I think you're absolutely right. Like, if we just go in and wing it, I think there's amazing lessons to be learned, definitely, in doing that. And sometimes I think not planning is actually better. You plan too much, you're going to be just doing things by the book, and you're not going to actually live and enjoy it. So I think there's a nice balance to find there. But I really like how you said that they are as close to, source, or whatever you want to say, whatever you want to use, because that's what I see too. And it's that communication piece that really is like preventing them. The more my daughter starts to understand language and understand that she can do things, I'm like, I don't know how to control you anymore. Like, in which I think that's a thing you got to be careful of too, is like, how can you communicate and have discipline without enforcing like a lot of control, a lot of like repressing control? So something to maybe plan for of how can you handle this communication piece?
Totally. I love that you said that too, because I just recently got turned on to a gal who's a coach in that specific area, um, who does what she calls positive parenting. And it's all about those two ways of approaching discipline, if you will. And one is the punishment mindset, the blame, shame, and pain, which is kind of an old school type thing where it's, while you're under my roof, you do as I say, almost like a dictator type thing, a tyranny. And then the other is saying that there is this conscious discipline or positive discipline approach where you give your child an element of choice, right? You come up with something that is there as a consequence, right? So these are consequences for action. So a child sees that, hey, listen, if this behavior continues, here's how it's going to play out, right? And it's related to what's going on. But, I'm going to give you an option, right? You can, because kids love, she says, they have two buckets to be filled. One is power, right? They're learning independence. And so they like to establish some form of autonomy and sovereignty. And the other is attention. And they need them to be filled. And yes, a lot of it can be filled positively, but they can also be filled negatively. And if they're not getting enough positive attention or enough positive power opportunities, they will go at it negatively, right? And they will find a way to scream or yell or do whatever it is because they want to get a reaction out of you. And if they get that reaction, that barking or biting or punishing type thing, it's like, whoa, they got a reaction. And they might continue to do it over and over and over and over again. But I loved how she was looking at it, like saying, the days of the blame, shame, and pain and dominance, yelling, punishment. As soon as you punish a child and they don't understand it, they go into kind of freeze mode and learn the lesson is no longer there. But if you give a child a choice and they understand, what's about to happen if something happens, and you do it in a calm fashion. And that's where we, as parents, like you mentioned earlier, have to do the work on ourselves with breath work and meditation.
Yeah.
When the storm hits, right, we can be calm. And
Right.
I thought that was awesome because when I started taking some of the classes, I didn't even really do it justice. I was like, I think every father should hear this type of thing. So.
Yeah, love that. I mean, after you said that, like looking at my own experience, it's like I can see both sides. I can see when I fall into that old school way and it's like, it doesn't work. I can tell it doesn't work. But like you said, like when we are not filling our own cup, when we are not nourishing ourselves, it becomes that much harder. It becomes infinitely harder to really hold the presence and hold the patience. If you're getting like 4 hours of sleep a night and you don't have any self-care practice, it's like you're running on fumes if you're working all day. And I mean, that's a key thing, I think, going into fatherhood is like get your self in order so that you can really be there, not only for your children, but also for your partner, for your family, like friends. It's really hard going into an unplanned pregnancy, for one, and in maintaining yourself, your relationships, your lifestyle. It's almost impossible, really. So that would be a huge recommendation from me, is like, see what you can do to really lock in your own self-care before, during, after, all the time. Because like you said, it's really important to have that presence and groundedness when the storm starts coming up. And it's like, if a kid's throwing a fit, it's like nails on chalkboard sometimes for me. I'm like, okay, let me just breathe.
Yeah. Well, that's it. I think you just hit the nail on the head, was that simple pause, that which we sometimes forget to do, and come back to the breath in that moment, because it can just create the gap, right, between the stimulus and the response. And sometimes that's enough to just allow for the opportunity to say, okay, like you said, how could I possibly bring love to this moment as opposed to some form of egoic explosion, right? Where if
Yeah.
I'm in that fight or flight and I have no gas in my tank, you don't take that breath and you don't pause when you're feeling like you want to jump. Um, it's no good for anybody.
Right.
So talk to me a little bit about that, like, because I know you do a lot with breath work on your own, but you're also coaching people with that too, right? Is that one of those things that you feel is a really valuable tool for fathers and people in general to be able to maintain a level of equanimity in this thing we call life?
Absolutely. I mean, breathwork is something I came into kind of late in my journey, but immediately I saw the value in it as something that can raise consciousness, raise calmness, heal. There's so many benefits to breathwork. And when it comes to like raising children or being in the family unit, as a man, there's a lot of emotion that's going to be swirling around, a lot of emotion that sometimes we can get sucked into, and being able to hold your ground and really be the calm in that storm is invaluable. So breath work, I'm still training. It's like an 8-month program. So I'm training and I'm also using it in my coaching. And it's just been a game changer as far as what I see with my own results in my life and what my clients see. So many benefits, you can't list them all. I mean, in regards to family, presence, being calm, being centered, just having that extra juice, having that extra energy where you can like give some. And not only that, but share it with your children, like teach them to breathe. Like when they're throwing a fit, sometimes they're like, it's like, or they're not breathing. That's what I really notice is like when I can put a hand on my daughter's chest and say, hey, let's just breathe a minute. Like sometimes that touch and that action goes way further than words could. So
I love I love that idea of just the gentle touch, and because I think it's something that's hardwired into us, right? That we just, the child in particular, they just want to be held, they want to be hugged, and
yeah.
if their father figure is there with that loving touch, that pause, it's like right on the heart, as opposed to the iron fist, so to speak. I
Yeah.
mean, we have that opportunity in that moment to be a really um, beneficial presence for the child, not only in the moment, but for their entire life, in their relationship to men, in relationship
Mm,
to people that are supposed to hold them safe, right? And so when we do that, I love that you do that, man. That's totally killer. So good for you.
yeah. That
Um,
plus like hugging. I mean, if they can feel you breathing, then it
mm,
just gets into like coherence sort of thing. So
yeah, the heart coherence, it's amazing.
yeah.
Yeah. And then also for you, you've done meditation as well over the years too, right? And that's another thing that, in my opinion, works hand in hand with breath work,
Mm,
as because it's in that there are many ways to approach meditation, but one basic is the idea of getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, right? Because for many men, the idea of sitting still is like, are you kidding me? I'd rather, do chop wood 100 times over than just sit still for 10 minutes, right?
yeah.
So have you found that in your time with men, have you found it easy to get men to be interested in meditation, or what's your experience with it?
Yeah. So, I mean, meditation to me is one of those words that can mean 1,000 different things to whoever. So the way I approach it is like, what's going to work for you? If you need to be one of those people that's moving, like you can do meditation when you're walking, when you're running, when obviously when you're sitting, but like we were just talking about breath work is one of those things that it's like a doing that actually ends up being like a being. It's like you're breathing, but then eventually the breath takes over and now you're in this meditative state, just really simply. So I find the breath to be really helpful for that. And then I think one of the big issues with sitting meditation is comfort. You
Mm,
know, if you can work the body out, and really work through some of these kinks and tightnesses that build up from work, working at a desk all day and just the stress of life and whatever else has been in your history, then sitting meditation is going to be a lot more enjoyable. It's because you're not going to be like, oh, let me just get comfortable, and then all these things are on my mind. It's like meditation as a practice, I like to promote, make it your own. Do what works for you. I think sitting meditation or laying meditation in the long run is going to have the deepest result, but getting there for some people is a challenge. Breath work and working out the body, like to feel good during that, are my two methods of helping people do that.
I love that. The idea of the comfort, I think, is really paramount, especially in the beginning, because it's like, yeah, if you're sitting there and you've seen the picture of a person sitting cross-legged, and so you try to go there, and for men, so many of them, their hips are super tight, and you ask them to start there, all they're going to be doing is thinking about the pain in their thighs, right?
Yeah.
And just want it, and they're like, this sucks. I have no interest in it. So I love just finding a comfortable entry point through the body and saying what works for you, right? It doesn't have to be that perfect picture of what it's supposed to look like. It can look so many different ways.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Even like using something to prop you up so that you have comfort, something to hold your back against anything that's going to help you really do that non-work or work or whatever you want to call it.
yeah. And I found too, I don't know about you, but starting with, if you're talking about meditation, even starting with just breathing meditations, right? Just treat the whole thing as a breath practice. And just get used to following the incoming, following the outgoing, and whatever way you want to talk about the breath. But just starting with the breath is a hugely valuable tool. And it's in my experience, it's the one common through line through all the different styles and techniques of meditation. They all have some form of connection to breath. And one of my teachers once said it's primarily because, one, it does a lot for the nervous system and the brain waves, but he said you can't breathe in the past, you can't breathe in the future, you can only breathe in the present moment. And so that whole goal is to not be in either of those places, but to be right there, experiencing whatever's coming up and be okay with it. So
yeah, I love that. The breath to me is like a gateway to awareness, which meditation, you're trying to build your awareness kind of in some ways. So
yeah, and that's just
very valuable.
You think about something else too. It's like just talking about emotion on some level, because for a lot of men, they struggle to be emotional, right? And so I had an interesting conversation with another father recently, and he was like, you'll often hear somebody say, like a child might say to their parent, like, why do I have to do that? And a parent might just say, because I said so. Or they'll just come back with that. They don't give them like anything that makes sense to the child, right? Other than I am dominating you. And it comes to that with emotions too, because so often a person like, daddy's angry. And they'll be like, why are you angry, daddy? And the dad can't even give voice to it. I just am, And I think as a parent, it's important to develop a vocabulary around emotions, right? And that's where, I love the work you're doing with men. Yeah, on so many different levels, but part of it is developing an emotional IQ, right? Is so that they can learn what they're physically feeling in their body, where they're feeling it, and then give words to it. Because if I can do that for myself, that's a huge gift I can give to my child. Saying you're not just angry to be angry. There's a reason, and it's this going on. And I'm feeling it here. I think that's a powerful tool. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I really love that. I haven't practiced it though, like bringing the language element into it. For me, it's almost enough to just be able to say it. I think a lot of men, especially, really block it out or kind of repress those emotions. Don't know how to express them. So I think even making it okay to simply express the emotion and not feel shame or any negative emotion to pile onto that, where it associates with expressing yourself. And my thing is always like, what works for me is always bringing it back to the body. The emotion is just an energy, and like, it might be coming for many men from way back in their past, where I don't want them to have to dig it up. I don't want them to have to dig everything up. I just want them to be able to feel it and let it move, and process where it hasn't in the past. But I do love the way you are helping your children, or your child, with that, because that is something I haven't really thought too much on. So something that I really value you bringing up, because it's something I'd like to begin to at least think about and notice, and really maybe help my children with.
Oh, no, I appreciate that, man. And you mentioned, kind of working through the body and embodiment. That kind of naturally led itself to the idea of you being a divine embodiment coach. And I mean, it really resonated with me when I heard it, because a huge part of my being on this planet would be what I would call a spiritual path, and a connection to the divine, to spirit, and in a oneness, right, with all of life. To get to a place where you recognize that it's, as it affects one, it affects all. So it really resonated when I heard it. I know to some people they may not really get it, but I'd love you to speak a little bit about, what divine embodiment is to you, and, what you're doing with that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I appreciate you saying that it resonated with you, because for me, I can see some people maybe being really turned off by it, because it might seem, I don't know what the word would be, like, kind of like, I feel like I'm divine and only I am, sort of thing. But what I see it as is, we're all already divine, and we just don't realize it. We don't perceive it. We don't experience it, because we're denying ourselves with these fearful emotions of hate, shame, guilt, greed, all these things that prevent us from actually recognizing everyone else and the world as divine, as its kind of like fundamental essence. So what I truly believe is, when we do recognize that, when we recognize it within ourselves, we'll see it outward. And when we recognize it outwardly, we'll see it in ourselves. And that is going to be the thing that actually like changes the entire world. And I think it is already. It's starting to like gain momentum. So when I say divine embodiment, I mean, you're going to embody as the divine in manifestation, in reality, in your subjective experience. And that act of being and presence will emanate out from you and impact everyone that comes in contact with you in a beneficial way, without forcing them to be something that they're not.
I love that, because that's so often the case too. It's like people want to put people in boxes, right? And like you said, forcing them to be something that they're not, or that it's like with our child, it's the same thing, right? It's like somehow letting go of our agenda or our expectation of what or how another being should be on this planet, other than honoring, like you just said, at their core, seeing them as love, as beauty, as, as wisdom, as light, however you want to look at it, but allowing them to become who they are, rather than having that forced on them and putting them into a box, when ultimately what we're talking about is this is limitless. Really, the ability and the power that is within each and every one of us. No one is left out, right? That's what you're saying. And that's what I love about it, because I understand that, because I've heard that kind of thing too, where people think, oh, you're saying, you're this special thing. And it's not that at all. It's saying we all are, right? We're unique emanations of this presence, which is never an absence. It's in absolutely everything that we see at all times, right? And that's big, And so I applaud you for going there to like share that, because I see that as like you said, I believe that is something that could be a healing balm to this planet, especially right now when there's so much divisiveness and people are speaking apples to oranges, right? It's like finding a way to see the truth of each being, no matter what the story is around it. I don't know. It's a lot of
Right
stuff.
now, the polarity is just so strong, where there's just two sides and everything. And, you know, that's giving us a great opportunity to see that there aren't actually two sides. It's just all the same. But one thing that is great that we can do is actually claim it for them in our experience. So it's like, that's how we help people is, you know, that's what the love your enemy claim is. Love your enemy is not about like, yeah, let's hang out. It's about seeing the divine in them and recognizing that in them. So that's really valuable. And, you know, while you're building up to that, it's kind of challenging. And that's the great thing about kids and nature. It's like you can tell that kids and like animals and trees and all this stuff is just, you can tell that it's noble, that it's valuable and beautiful already. And so that's the beautiful thing about having kids is it's like these little reminders here that how can I be more like this kid who's just trying to play and just trying to learn and be curious about life instead of trying to dominate it, which we do all the time through language and concept and judgment and so many different things. So yeah, I think to me, it's the most important thing. And I think it's going to be a game changer. I can see that you resonate with it in your work as well. Like that's what I've seen as we've gone through our journey together these past few months. So.
No, thank you, man. And you said a word, and I think you wrote a post on it recently, that just that curiosity that kids have, and we tend to lose that as we put on years on this planet, and that's how we interact with life in the beginning, right? It's just curious.
Yeah.
And so I love that post that you wrote, and I would encourage anybody, and we'll get to how they can follow you, but to follow your work because it's fantastic.
Oh,
And
thank you, man.
the seeds that you're planting and just the ideas that you're getting people to be reflective upon or on, I think are fantastic. It's so needed. So we'll get to that too. But
yeah, I appreciate you.
the gift I think that you're talking about too is also keeping our kids connected to nature, right? As much as we can. And it's been a little challenging for many people with the pandemic and the lockdowns and everything. But as things start to open up, I think it's super important for them and us to spend time in nature. And I'm assuming you, and I could see from your social media, you guys do. You get out there, right, and connect with nature and let it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, nature to me is a reflection of our wildness, you know, and the world we're born into just tames you the whole way. So you get back out into nature, you're getting those vibrations of like who you truly are. You can start to connect with the ground and all. Like I like to see it as vibration. And as far as kids getting out there, like look at what they have the rest of the time. It's screens, it's plastic toys, it's all this stuff that isn't dynamic. It's not, it doesn't have depth. It doesn't have true, like you can actually grab it. You know, you can actually grab it with your perception. You go out into nature and you try and grab a tree with your perception, you're going to be like, okay, there's a billion leaves. And it's like, everything is so deep out there and it's healing. The air is better. The sunlight is good for you. The ground is good for you. All of it's good for you. So I think getting out there into nature is so important for kids. It's something I felt like I lacked as a kid growing up because I went down like the video game rabbit hole really hard. So
that's interesting too. Isn't that wild? I mean, our life takes us exactly where we need to go, but I find that so, I think it's beautiful too, right? That you are an example of somebody who began that way, but then has like worked on yourself and shape shifted the lens of perception ultimately, right? Because today the interpretation of the event is the event. And so it's like the lens we're looking through is either very myopic or it becomes incredibly expansive.
Right.
Through the work that you've done, you know, you've gone from being that person who's a gamer, right? To this person who's teaching divine embodiment, right? And connection to nature. All that's fantastic. I mean, so I see you as an unbelievable role model because I know a lot of kids today are trapped in that space too, and where, you know, technology is a huge part of it. And it can be a blessing too. It's a beautiful thing. It allows us to have this conversation right now.
Oh yeah. It's a double-edged sword, but let's look at why. You know, like you said, there's those two buckets. power and attention. We want power. And a video game is a place where you're infinitely powerful in a world that makes you feel powerless.
Yeah.
So I value that. I value all my experiences. And it gave me the opportunity to learn to heal, to learn like what I was missing. It was because I was so like pinholed into this screen. It was like, this was my world. And then there was all this world around me. And it's like, once I realized that, it was like, whoa, this is where the value is. Let me play my game of life,
Yeah, amen to that. I think that's beautiful. Right? You take it away from the screen and the box inside the box, and you go, this is, if you can, treat it as this beautiful game. I've often said it's kind of like the Matrix, in real life, and it's just like, we get to choose the way we interpret the experience. And when we work on ourselves enough through these modalities of breath work and meditation and cold immersion and journaling and whatever. I mean, there's so many of them.
Yeah.
It's like you're taking the pill, right? That allows you to see through a different lens. That's like, it's like rose colored. It's like you've been watching life in black and white, and all of a sudden now we're getting this, HD TV or whatever it is. And it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's incredible how much our life can be enriched by letting more in, taking down those walls that we all build up and just letting it in. I think that's the big part. And it's not always fun, but there are those few things that I think truly benefit everyone, which is like breath work, meditation, movement, connection. And then there's all those other modalities that work for individuals as well. So it's beautiful where we're heading as a society, I believe. And I think you're seeing technology actually mirror what is going to be possible through consciousness eventually. Like once we truly realize our power, like, and really embody that in love, like where it's not going to become like this dystopian, weird, imagined world. It's going to be, here's reality. What do you want to create here? What do you want to, but like, how do you want to be here?
Yeah.
So it's going to I think it's going to get fun, really. And the work that's going on right now in men's communities and things like that is so needed right now, because I feel like men got kind of left in the dust for a little bit.
I do too. I'm glad you brought that up, the idea of community for men and the brotherhood there, because I think it's been something that isn't stressed enough. And for me personally, I remember when my son was first born, I was like, I just wanted to connect to any man who had a child, just because I was like, what I'm doing. And just like, I want to, hello, would you be my friend type thing? You end up being on an island. And I love that these groups are coming together. And I know you do men's groups, and you have like a mastermind perhaps coming up, and different things that you are putting together, because I don't know if you want to speak to community in general, like you did a little bit, but your thoughts on that for men. I think it's super important.
Yeah. So, I mean, when I first got pregnant, it was like the years following my friend group slowly went away because they didn't have kids, so it was like, I felt very alone. And that's when I started to turn to the internet. It's like, where am I going to find people? First of all, in the COVID era, like, is when I've really started to turn to people and be like, I need some community. I need some powerful men around me to support me and to kind of learn from and grow with and help too. Like, here's my experience. What's your experience? So I run a men's group called the Wild Men. It's really focused on spiritual progress, but I mean, what doesn't fall into spirituality? And then I'm about to launch a mastermind called the Wild Kings. That and the reason for the mastermind is, I just think that when you're working online and it's not a existing friend group, and you really want somebody to push you, you need to commit. You need to commit to showing up, to even financial commitment at times, and things like that, because otherwise there's going to be something that comes up in life that knocks you off and kills your momentum and makes you not feel proud to go back to the group and say, hey, I messed up and failed and I don't feel good about it. I don't even want to be here, sort of thing, So that's what the mastermind's for. The Wild Men is just kind of my foundational group where everyone's included. And I like to throw in some breath work, some men's calls, and all sorts of stuff in there. So
I love
it's
that.
fun. And you've got a group too, right?
Yeah, and it's similar, but it's got its own unique qualities. But I think it's necessary, and I like the idea, like you said. Sometimes you got to put some skin in the game, and saying I'm going to show up. I know personally for myself, recently did that with some coaching, and got myself to a point of being scared, saying this is not the normal that I would do. But when we invest in ourselves like that, it's like I know for myself, I am going to put my heart into it, and I'm going to show up, and it makes a difference. It's fascinating how you will show up for yourself and for the people in your life, because the work we do on ourselves, I believe that's one of the most important things as fathers, is to say it all begins with us working on us. It's like we really want to fix the child out there, but it's really fixing the inner child here, right? Or just saying, where can I grow up, right? And look at things differently and come from a more nurturing, loving space. And that takes, like you said, it takes work, and we're going to bump up against waves, man. Life is not always pretty, but it's always amazing, right? It's like about it. It's like it's rough and it gets tough, and but the journey is worth every step we take, So.
Well said, man. I mean, it goes back to self-care. I think for most men in this day and age, men's groups are self-care. Some kind of community. It doesn't even have to be just men, but I think that helps for most men in this day and age with how prevalent trauma is and repressing, our emotions and all that kind of stuff. So I would suggest anybody to find a men's group that you like, find people that you resonate with, and just dive into it, because it's not that scary once you're there.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. And based on time, I think I want to start wrapping it up. I could talk to you for hours on this stuff. I love all this stuff we're talking about, and maybe we'll get on again sometime, talk about many different things. But I want to close out by just, where can people find you on social media? And I'll put the links in my thing too. But what are the best ways to find Jakob Brown?
Yeah. So right now I'm just running on social media. So I am Jakob Brown on Instagram, and that's Jacob with a K. And then on Facebook, Jakob Brown, like 900 or something. I think I need a new Facebook thing, but just search my name. There's not that many Jakob Browns with a K. So that's where I'm at. That's where you can find me. Definitely message me if you want to learn more about realizing higher consciousness sort of thing. I'm definitely looking forward to collaborating with you in the future, just around, because I know we share so many common interests with children and breathwork, meditation, spirituality, and everything that goes along with being a man in this day and age, relationships, probably. I'm sure you've put some work in there. So that's where you can find me, though. Instagram's an easy one. And look forward to hearing from anybody, and just sharing what I have to share. I mean, I'm getting excited for this next season of life.
Yeah, man. As it should be, because you're doing amazing work. And again, I just can't thank you enough for coming on today, taking some time out of your valuable time, because being a family man, I know how that is. So.
Well, yeah, thank you for having me. I mean, I'm excited to see where we both go. So excited to be on this journey with you, brother.
Likewise, man. And we will connect again soon, my friend.
Definitely.
All right. Take care, Jakob.